Well, hi everybody. I want to welcome you to our talks on Tuesday for June. You see folks are kind of be trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's talks on Tuesday is the second in a two-part series about tele-intervention in Virginia. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the content from part one in case you missed it, and I'll get you oriented to where we're going today in just a moment. But my name's Dana Childress. I am an early intervention professional development consultant with the Partnership for People with Disabilities at Virginia Commonwealth University. So I'm on our state's professional development team with Lisa Terry and Corey Hill are both here. Lisa is there backing me up, which is wonderful. So if you have any tech questions, feel free to type them into the chat, I guess, assuming your tech is working, right? But they're here to help us out. And I see folks are starting to type into the chat. If you guys want to type into the chat and just say hi, let us know who you are and where you're from. And you might see some comments in there. We were typing in some fun stuff we did over the holiday weekend. So I hope you guys all enjoyed your hopefully long weekend. So last month, for part one of this webinar series, I was joined by Kyla Patterson from our state's Infant and Toddler Connection of Virginia office and Dr. Megan Schumacher Murphy to share some information about data from two surveys of Virginia practitioners about their experiences providing tele-intervention in 2020. This month, we're going to extend that discussion by digging into some of the themes with current early intervention practitioners. So I'm just facilitating the discussion today, but the real stars of the show are our expert panel of practitioners. So you can see their cameras open right now. I'm actually going to wait to introduce them though, in just a few minutes when we change the view of the screen so that you can actually see them a little better for our video chat discussion. So hang tight, I'm going to introduce our folks in just a moment. I do want to invite you to use chat to share your questions, share your comments, share your experiences today. I think everybody probably knows how to use Zoom by now because people live 80% of their lives virtually, right? But in case that's helpful for you, if Zoom is a platform you're not using, just hover your cursor at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a black toolbar come up and then you'll see a chat bubble icon. When you click that bubble, that will give you access to the chat window so you can join the conversation. As we talk today, I'll be throwing some questions out to our panelists, but I want to invite you to answer the questions in chat so that we can have a conversation back and forth with you guys as well. So let me tell you where we're going today. So for today, we're going to start out with a quick review of some of the themes discussed in part one. And I'm going to review those just in case you weren't able to catch the part one webinar at the beginning of May. Know that if you didn't and you would like to, that webinar is archived on the Virginia Early Intervention Professional Development Center site on the 2021 archived page for talks on Tuesdays. Then we will discuss some of the panelists' impressions and experiences around the themes that came up in the surveys and how to connect that information to their everyday experiences. I'm going to invite the panelists to share ideas for overcoming some challenges, and I would love for our audience members to share your how you've overcome challenges in chat as well. And then we'll also wrap up with a little talk about making the transition or starting to make the transition back to some in-person services, because we know lots of programs are starting to head in that direction. So let's get started by revisiting some of the themes from last time. So oops, that was a quick review, right? So here we are. Last month, Kyla Patterson, as I mentioned, from our state's office, shared with us some survey information from the Virginia Provider Implementation Survey. The data was collected in 2020. There were 5 questions added to that survey this past year that were related to tele-intervention because of all of our unique circumstances, right, with the pandemic and service delivery. So she shared data from these 2 questions. And so I've just targeted the coaching questions among all 5 of the new questions because that relates so closely what we're going to talk about today. So when the providers who answered the implementation survey were asked if tele-intervention had strengthened their use of coaching practices, you can see here the vast majority strongly or mostly agreed, right? Almost 75%. When they were asked about, kind of reflecting on the result of the experience of providing tele-intervention, whether or not they would be more confident and consistent in using coaching practices during in-person visits, again, we have a high level of agreement between strongly and mostly agree. Similarly, on the other survey that we talked about last month, Megan and I shared some themes. So that survey came out also at the end of 2020 and was designed to try to find out about the experiences, some of the challenges, some of the hopes of early intervention practitioners, but kind of regarding their experience of providing tele-intervention. We heard from 151 Virginia practitioners. We launched the survey in 3 states, but so far we've heard from 26 states, which is amazing, but the largest group so far has been from Virginia. So some of the Virginia themes, similar to what Kyla shared with the provider implementation survey, there were strong themes related to coaching. We heard that the use of telepractice or tele-intervention, telehealth, whichever you want to call it, resulted in people feeling that their coaching practices had improved. But we also heard that going into tele-intervention with coaching, that you knew how to coach, made telepractice easier. So coaching had some nice benefits either way. Let's see. We also heard about family engagement. That was a huge theme. So with family engagement, when you consider, this was from the practitioner's point of view. So among families who were able to take advantage of tele-intervention, we heard that there was really nice increased family engagement. We heard folks say that practitioners loved how families were taking the lead with their children. There was much stronger caregiver-child interaction because, kind of it had to be the way tele-intervention works. But people loved it that families really felt empowered and really confident. And it was just a different way to support families that worked really well for a lot of families. We also heard about provider benefits, things like reduced travel. Everybody loved the reduced travel. It lended itself to increased flexibility for matching family schedules. Some folks took on more families than they maybe would have when they were having to travel all over their county or their city. We also heard benefits of the increased parent-child interaction. Providers really liked that. And we heard benefits for sort of the development of better verbal communication. So as opposed to relying on modeling intervention strategies, now providers had to really talk families through it, and that became a really great benefit. Challenges, as you might imagine, included things like technology, but technology wasn't actually the most mentioned challenge for us, which was interesting. The most mentioned challenge was families declining early intervention. We also heard difficulties with supporting parent-child interaction virtually, challenges with figuring out how to teach families without being able to model and directly put your hands on the child and put your hands on the toys or whatever the materials were. And we're going to talk about that today. We also heard challenges with managing your life, managing your EI visits with the rest of your own life, maybe with other children in the home doing virtual schooling. So we're going to talk about how to overcome some challenges today. And then the biggest theme we heard in the second survey was that practitioners, 97% of Virginia practitioners indicated that they would like for telepractice to continue. So in Virginia, we tend to call it telehealth, but we would like for that to continue as an option for service delivery post-pandemic. We also heard that Kyla shared with us that there's efforts underway, and there have been even before the pandemic, but efforts under the way to try to make this option a long-term option beyond the summer. So hopefully more news will be coming about that. So with that in mind, I would love for you guys to type into chat and let me know, what do you think some of the benefits might be of continuing to offer tele-intervention, telehealth, whichever phrase you want to use, but to continuing to offer that as a service delivery option for early intervention. So type into chat for me, what might be some of the benefits of a continued tele-intervention option? Yeah, Missy says when some kiddos don't feel well in the home, or someone doesn't feel well in the home, you can still see them. We heard that in the surveys for the practitioners too. If the practitioner didn't feel well, but wasn't sick enough not to see families, that might be a way to stay linked. We also heard that with children who are medically fragile, that could be a really nice way to keep up with the families and to help with health and safety in mind. Karen says, yeah, when folks in the home are sick, snow, when you don't have to work around snow, for sure. Yeah, and Michelle said the same thing, snow. Anna, hi Anna, says flexibility and options for families and providers. Yeah, we also heard practitioners in the survey say sometimes it was really nice because both parents would log in from different places and join sessions. And that didn't happen before when maybe one of the parents was, out working outside of the home. So that was a nice bit of flexibility. Hi Terry. Terry says specialty providers have a wider reach. So yeah, if we have areas of the state that maybe have some provider shortages, then there might be providers in other areas of the state that could meet with families. So that's an exciting option, I think. Jenny says access to specialists, yep, in different areas, maybe meeting with clients later, earlier during times when they need ideas. Yeah, I heard Jenny of folks saying that a parent had texted and said, you know, whatever it was, it's happening now. And the provider was able to jump on and see what the interaction was to give kind of support in the moment. And I thought that was very cool. Yeah, Dana says supporting rural families. Andrea says higher attendance rate, much easier to reschedule. That's a good point, Andrea. Like the rescheduling, this can be a little more flexible. Nancy says no travel needed, so you can see more families in a day. That's great. Children in different, Bailey says seeing children in different natural environments. Yeah, so I've heard practitioners talk about getting to see things that maybe they wouldn't have seen by actually being present in the home. And we're going to talk about that some. More children served. Yep. Parents have a harder time canceling if they say we can't come to the house. Yeah, so that might help with, you know, keeping services more consistent. And then Terry says supervising or coaching providers. Yeah, so maybe that coach or that supervisor can just log in and keep his or her webcam off, so it's a little less intrusive. So there's lots of benefits, and we'll have to see how this shakes out over time. But I feel like we've got a good chance. I think our field sort of had to learn something really fast and really hard this year, but I think there's going to be some really nice long-term benefits as we're, you know, kind of figured. It's actually really nice to be at a place where we are trying to figure out what's going to come next, because, you know, we're changing. The pandemic is changing. Okay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to change your screens to the view of your screen so we can have our video chat. I wanted to give you a heads up though. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, the slides, and when I change the video screen, what you should see is our panelists. And what I'm hoping will appear, because I'm showing it that way on my computer, is gallery view. So gallery view should have your screen look something like this. This isn't a Zoom screen, but similar. You'll see the multiple webcams open. If when you get to the next view, when I close my slides and you don't see something like this, look for the view option, the little view icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. When you click this little button, you'll have your view options and you can click gallery view. So if you have any worries about that, just let us know. I'm going to stop sharing so you will see. All right, so let me see. Okay, so you should be able to see our participants at the top of your screen. And I am going to, there we go. We've adjusted it so we should see our participants there. You do have, hold on just a second. Let me check my view. You do have the option of putting us in speaker view. Actually, now that I'm seeing that, that might not even be a better option. If you choose speaker view, you'll only see the people with the open webcams. So that might be another way to do it, or you can click gallery view. So either view, you should be able to see us pretty well. I'm going to put us in speaker, so hopefully you're seeing just the panelists. Okay. So first thing I want to do is introduce our panelists. I'm so grateful to have them join me for the discussion today. And before I call out names and they give a wave so you know who is who, I want to let you know that they might look kind of familiar. Our panelists graciously sent in videos last summer of themselves talking about their experiences, starting to provide tele-intervention and sharing some of the strategies, talking about some challenges, things like that. So if you missed the Teleflections video series, that was what we launched last summer, that's available. It's archived, so it's available. So maybe if Lisa, if you don't mind posting in the link to the Teleflections video series, you can find it on the VEIPD videos channel, or you can find it linked from the veipd.org site on our tele-intervention page. All right. So I'm just going to call out names, people will give a wave, and then we're going to jump in. So I'm going to start with Missy. So Missy Rose is a physical therapist in the Tidewater region. Missy's also an adjunct instructor at Old Dominion University and an infant toddler specialist network consultant. So Missy's a little busy, but I think that's how she likes it. So we're happy to have her here. We have Dana Carroll, who's an occupational therapist. Dana's also in the Tidewater region and is the owner of the Play to Grow therapy company. Brandy Kendrick is our service coordinator, so we're happy to have a service coordinator's view. Brandy's a service coordinator, supervisor, and intake coordinator in the far southwest region. We have Michelle Harris, a speech language pathologist in the Valley region. Hi, Michelle. And Naomi Grinney, who's a licensed clinical social worker in the Northern Virginia region. So Corey, yep, thanks. Oh, Corey and Lisa posted information about Teleflections. So that's available. You can click on that link and bookmark that if that's something you'd like to check out. The videos are short and sweet, which is really nice. If you just need a quick idea about something, these are a great resource to hear from your people, hear from other early interventionists. All right. So what we're going to do, this video chat, at least it looks a little different than a typical Talks on Tuesday. But what I'm going to do is I have about 4 or 5 questions I'm going to toss out to our panelists. I'll call folks by name just to get the discussion going. When I throw out the question, you guys are welcome to type into chat, our audience members, your answer, what your thoughts are about it. I'll be doing my best to monitor our discussion and monitor chat. The panelists will also be keeping an eye on chat and typing in responses and questions that come up. So this is like multitasking conversation, right? But we can do it. We're all good at multitasking. So, all right. So let's get started. So when we think about the themes from the surveys that I just went through, there was a really interesting theme across both surveys related to coaching. Particularly with coaching practices improving from the use of tele-intervention, which was really interesting. So I want to hear from our panelists what that was like for you guys and what went well over the last year related to coaching. So folks, feel free to type into chat what went well for you related to coaching in the chat. And I'm going to throw this out. I think I'll throw it to Michelle first. If you don't mind, you get to be the first one, the guinea pig, Michelle. If you don't mind unmuting, let me know, how was coaching for you this year?
So it was actually pretty great. I feel bad if I bored some of my families because I had the same book for over a year for modeling some of those book reading routines. But I found that in the home, sometimes I would say, let's wash dishes, let's do the laundry. And parents would go, okay, later, or I'll use that strategy on my own time. I felt like I was invited into those routines a little bit more because I wasn't physically there. They had a little bit more control of the view. If they thought, oh, that side of the sink is a little too messy, Michelle's not going to see it there. But we were able to do the same type of coaching routines with the families, and in some ways in more of those family routines. So that was pretty great.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, it must feel a little different, like they're taking you along with them, but how wonderful that you get a peek into other experiences. Dana, I'm going to throw it to you because I know you've had some interesting experiences with this in your field trip idea.
I think that so much, I think as we started coaching, we were all really good at embracing the awkward, particularly as we were first in the home and they may have had other therapy before, and just kind of getting them used to the coaching model. And so very early on in this, I had a parent who just wasn't really sure how to play, and I could just tell she was awkward. And it had been, quite some visits really kind of working through that. And one day we took a field trip. I was like, let's just go. Actually, I think I said next week, so she could kind of prep. Take a field trip next time. And we went, she said, this is his bedroom. And I saw so many toys. So I feel like, all of that time we could have been playing with some of those other things, and she would kind of awkwardly bring out the same things. And it was great. So really for the remainder, sometimes we just went on a field trip, and it was great.
Great. It's so good to have a phrase to use that's familiar to most families, right? And just sort of open that up, that you'd love to see what's there. We're not judging anything, but how helpful it is to see what the real life is like. I love that, Dana. So Brandy, I'm gonna throw it to you, and I'm wondering, when Dana said that awkwardness at the beginning, like what you might have done or service coordinators might have done to help set the stage for that coaching. Because if you think about it, Dana, like families it's hard to know what to expect when you're coming to the home, but when you're joining virtually, that might be even harder. So what was that like for you, Brandy?
I think for me, specifically as an intake coordinator, a lot of families were coming in saying, oh, my 18-month-old isn't going to sit in front of a computer screen. And there was a lot of like, I don't really know how this is going to work out. But as we moved into it, I'm like, let's go to the swing set, and that same concept of doing field trips was kind of done initially. And so for those that don't know anything other than telepractice, it seems to be really, really positive for them. But yes, lots of over communication. So sending videos of, this is what a coaching session may look like. This is what your session may look like. Referencing as many videos as possible to send them in advance of the appointment. I think that was very beneficial as well, to kind of set the stage for what services is going to look like right now.
Exactly. I love what you said, over communication, extra communication, but maybe that's what we saw in the survey about the better verbal communication. We also did see people talk about, I'm sending videos now where I hadn't before. I'm developing my own videos to show how to position or things like that. So some kind of cool creativity to help families get to the right spot. I'm just looking in chat and people were saying, Helen says families were more willing to share and get deeper than when they were comfortable in their environment without worrying what they were seeing, like Michelle said. Yeah, and Judith said she saw some kids all the way from the initial through discharge without ever having that face-to-face contact, which I'm hearing some people are saying, boy, I'm missing that. I want to get back to the face-to-face contact. What was it like for you, Naomi, working with families with coaching?
So I think just based kind of on what I do in the particular areas of my discipline area, coaching and kind of being on telehealth is something that some people have been familiar with doing. But what I found is that a lot of parents, you know, it can be challenging sometimes when we're talking about behavior and your child is, you know, in front of you. And we don't necessarily want to talk about some of those challenging behaviors that a child's experiencing. And so parents were really able to, you know, both participate together, or extended family members were able to participate. And we were able to have some more conversations where parents felt like they could be open and talking about some of their challenges. And they were also sharing a lot about just their own kind of mental health and how they were doing, which sometimes parents haven't been as willing to do in session. You know, they really want to focus on the challenge that they're experiencing. And so it was a nice way to be able to kind of offer that ability for parents to share, you know, just that they're feeling overwhelmed and you know, they don't know how to manage their day, or how am I going to meet all these different responsibilities. And so really being able to step in and provide support in that space was something unique that maybe wouldn't have happened, you know, quite the same way face to face.
Yeah, yeah. I think you guys are really talking about, you've taken advantage of this uniqueness of this opportunity in a real positive way for families, and it maybe opened some doors for you guys to learn about families too. So I love that. Thanks, Naomi. I'm curious, Missy, what it's like for you as a PT, and we're going to probably, our next question is going to talk a little bit about this, kind of, we can segue, but supporting families virtually with the positioning and all of that stuff, like how was the coaching for you? I imagine you had to really practice those verbal skills, right, to walk people through.
It took me a while to figure out how to talk a whole different way than I used to. So just learning what I actually wanted to say in easier terms, rather than being technical. And I used my therapy doll that's always right by my side. So, you know, because some parents, no matter how I tried to word things, it just wasn't working. So when that happened, I tried to use my doll. I put myself on the floor and had them watch. But then I think the thing that helped the most was actually getting the parent to go through what we wanted the child to go through, and just telling them, you know, they're supposed to move just like we do. So if you forget, it's okay. Just get down on the floor and do it. It's okay. And then that'll help you, like, you know, remember how we want to move the baby. So that's been good. And I've used siblings a lot. I had this siblings practice, and if they were sitting right there, I would ask them to show their mommy how to move that way, or, you know, have mom do it with the sibling first.
Yeah, and that's because the benefit of the sibling, they usually like to be involved. They can feel it out and they're part of it too. Yeah,
they want to be on the camera. So if we give them that little spot, then sometimes they back off and let somebody else have a turn.
That's a great tip.
They just want to be in the camera.
So maybe get that little sibling space right out of the camera for just a second, because they have a job to do. It's a great strategy. Yeah, Missy Karen is writing in chat as another PT yes to the doll. It was so important. I'm going to toss it to Dana, because I know you use a doll, and I'd love to hear, Dana, what kind of things have you done to kind of going along with what Missy said to support that parent-child interaction, especially when the modeling is hard? Like, you might not be able to, I know how you practice. You'd be there with the family, right there, kind of interacting with everybody. And how did you still do that virtually when you really weren't able to, like, put your hands on the child or model? What was that teaching like for you?
Well, I have a doll too. And I think that it's so easy for us to kind of picture, even if you're not a PT or an OT, one of us motor-based therapists, you know, that you would use it to, here, put your hand here, put your hand here. But I use the doll, use it in their home too. You know, and you show something, you know, they try, you try on the doll. But it was great with telehealth. I think we did feeding where you can, you know, kind of, I would run so often like, hang tight, I have to go get a spoon. Hang tight, I have to go get something. I'd run through the house, but just helping to use her, like, how do you put the spoon in their hand? Like modeling that. Or behavior, you know, how do you, instead of ignore, how do you withdraw? How do you try to get on eye contact? So there were so many, you know, because it's hard to put that into words. Like Missy was saying, sometimes it's hard to say, you know, I'd say, okay, look at the stairs, look at the stairs. And they're like, why would I look at the stairs? What? You know, trying to get them to look away. So it's really nice to use the baby, not just for positioning, but really for lots of things. I'd find myself sometimes kind of sitting like this, like, wait, I should put the baby down. I definitely use my daughter, you know, at the beginning of telehealth, we pretended that no one was home and we didn't have pets. And, you know, we were all sitting in our offices in this little perfect little telehealth world. But then I started using my daughter, you know, when they needed to see on somebody bigger than my baby. So I think it was very helpful to have that prompt for lots of different things, not just positioning.
Yeah, kind of using your resources, kind of just to convey the message in more than just words. Thanks, Dana. I love that.
I also think if you don't have a baby, because if you don't have kids, you might not have a baby, but there, you know, I've used pillows before, you know, anything that you can, you know, kind of, even a picture. So you know, even if you don't have a baby, there's lots of great ways to use some of those same prompts.
Yeah, early interventionists are creative, right? That's where it's coming out. I love it. Now, Dana mentioned behavior, so I'm going to toss it to Naomi. I'm wondering what it was like for you to subdue that teaching within that parent-child interaction, because I imagine that's hard, because sometimes the behavior happens, sometimes it doesn't during the visit. So how did that work for you to kind of connect the dots for families, Naomi?
Yeah, and it's such a great question, because I think sometimes what happens during a visit is that a parent kind of wants their child to engage in a behavior, right? So we can walk it through as it's happening. Sometimes though, when a behavior, particularly a challenging behavior, is happening, the parent is wanting to address that behavior. And so they may not be as open to kind of talking through what's happening, or they may not be able to be as reflective about, you know, what does their emotional state look like while this behavior is occurring. So I've had families where we've been on the playground and we've been trying to leave the playground, and the child is, you know, laying out in the middle of the grass, and the parent just wants to get them to the car, and they're like, what do I do? How do I manage this? What's going to happen now? And I'm like, I don't know if coaching is really going to work in this moment. So it's been really nice to have that opportunity kind of without, you know, kids still do have those behaviors kind of on screen. But it's been nice kind of in a more emotionally calm state to be able to talk to parents about, you know, what might you try, or what do you feel comfortable with, or what's worked for you before. And they've really been able to engage a little bit more with that reflection and thinking through, you know, I tried this and I don't think it really worked. I really want to try something else. And even just kind of thinking through what are their own expectations for what should happen in a particular moment. So it's been a nice way for parents to be able to engage in that process differently. And then also to be able to kind of come back and say, oh, I tried this because I felt like I had some strategies and I was able to be calmer in that interaction. So we've had a lot of, you know, really nice conversations around how parents can engage reflectively, and also how that changes the way that they act in the moment.
Yeah, you know, as you were talking, Naomi, I wondered if the dynamic of tele-intervention, which seems to take a little bit of the emphasis off the child sitting down and somebody playing with the child for 45 minutes, makes a little space for that parent interaction that you might have naturally with some families face-to-face, but some might find that different now when it's really you and me on the camera together talking, because the child can't sit for the whole 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever, in front of that screen. So maybe it makes some space for that better interaction and reflection between the parent.
Well, and the parent's been able to be creative. You know, if we can't expect a child to sit for that long, right? Like, I don't sometimes want to sit for that long, and I'm an adult. But what else could we do creatively, you know, that still allows that child to be close by? We could sit in color, so the focus isn't, this is mommy's session, but this is still our session together, but we can maybe engage in some different ways.
Yeah, definitely some benefits of like looking at it differently. So I love it. Thank you. So Michelle, what's it been like for you to sort of support that parent-child interaction? I know you mentioned your book as a prop, so I'm wondering what kind of things did you do to kind of teach the parent what to do, but from that distance?
I did a lot of talking. I am quite a talkative person.
I'm glad for today, right?
On the flip side, what was actually really nice is teletherapy gave me more opportunity to observe without feeling like I was awkward or without the family feeling like they were awkward. And after that observation, I like to give that direct feedback, the support, praise, and then even some, I noticed you did this. I'd like you to model it this way, further speech development. And I had a graduate student say, you really praised them a lot. And I went, thank you, that's my job. It's their job to coach, and it's my job to let them know how they're doing, because how frustrating would it be if you were a parent and you showed a routine and you're like, okay, how did I do? And I didn't have anything to say. So it's actually that parent education piece, letting them take the lead even more than in a face-to-face session, that has been really helpful with teletherapy.
Awesome. I love what you said about observation. You kind of brought that observation piece in, which I wondered if that gets back to what Dana was talking about some of the awkwardness at the beginning, like figuring out what to do. And I heard one provider say she would tell parents, I'm going to be quiet on this end and I'm just going to watch. So it wasn't that like I'm judging you or I'm watching for something to do wrong. It was like, I just want to see how you guys do your thing. And she kind of walked the parent through what to expect, that I'm just going to watch for a little bit and then we're going to talk about it. But it was a real nice way, like one of you guys, I think Brandy said, to sort of set the stage for that interaction to make it feel a little more safe. So I don't know if that's, what did you do, Michelle, to kind of prepare for the observation? Does that sound similar? Or
so sometimes, especially with book reading, some parents would say, I really don't know how to read a book to my child. Or if I'm working with families and they have a lot of English books in the home and they don't read English, I would show them, this is how I would do it. These are some ideas. What ideas do you like from this demonstration? And I have a mute button, and you can't do that when you're in someone's house, but I would say, I'd love to see you use some of your own strategies, use some of the strategies I showed you. And then there are other families who do have strategies that say, I just want to show you this routine. So I'll sit back and say, okay, I want to watch, and we're going to talk about it, to give your little one a break when they're done.
Yeah, I love that. So you can kind of adjust depending on where the family is, what they need. Yep. And let's see, Dana says the pause button. Wouldn't it be nice if the kids had a pause button so that we could just pause the interaction and we can talk about it? Yeah, that would be awesome. If you find the pause button, let us know. The mysterious pause button. Yep. Well, I love it. That's some great ideas, guys. So kind of use your observation, make the space for that parent-child interaction, use your tools. Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of transition us to talking about challenges, because I know there were a lot of them, and I know early interventionists were really creative in overcoming them. I would love to start with you, Brandy, if that's okay, to hear about challenges from us. Brandy's like, oh, me, from a service coordinator perspective, because I don't want to leave that perspective out, because that can be a little different than our other service providers. But when you guys are overcoming challenges, it's certainly affecting the whole team too. So what kind of challenges did you or your staff have to overcome this past year?
I think some of the challenges would kind of line up too with what other providers are saying in terms of decline, an increase of those that are declining services. But I think as a service coordinator, and from that perspective, documentation, we have gotten beyond creative. Initially, for me and in our area, it was like, I'm showing you a picture of the document just to have it on hand. Next thing you know, we're signing documents electronically. I think getting that piece of it was very difficult from a service coordinator perspective. But again, we start from the very beginning by setting the stage. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to send you this as a PDF. This is how, and we have to be mindful of protected health information. So literally, I feel like for the first 6 months of the pandemic, it was, how do we do this? And so we were constantly trying to figure out the best way to get documentation complete in a timely manner and have that, signed, and also just really communicate with the family. So screen share, we've gotten really creative with sharing our screen, even through coaching and that sort of thing. But the most challenging has definitely been getting documentation and signatures from families when everything was literally shut down for a while there. So,
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I've heard all kinds of creative ways people have been overcoming that kind of coming around the back door, trying to figure out. And what that says to me is all the hard work you guys did to make sure services continued. Like you had everything in place so our service providers could keep seeing families and families could get what they need. And, all that behind the scenes work sometimes is easy to not notice what's happening. But I know service coordinators were working hard to still figure out how to host the assessments and how to write those IFSPs. I heard service coordinators talk about the screen sharing and how it ended up being a really nice resource when you're talking about the prior notice and consent forms and walking through the IFSP, that now everybody's looking at the same thing as opposed to I'm just sharing my copy, with the family. So there's some pretty cool uses of technology to kind of build that teaming. So very cool. Thank you, Brandy. I guess I'm going to ask Missy next. Missy, what kind of challenges came up for you over the pandemic when you were supporting families, and how did you get around them? And I'm going to say, Missy, before you jump in, for our audience members, if you guys want to type into chat, like one of your biggest challenges and how you got around it, we'd love to see that in chat too. So go ahead, Missy.
We can start by saying what didn't happen. That list is much smaller. But, besides from the technical part where,
Yes.
I would be able to see them, but not hear them or things like that.
Folks got frustrated when they couldn't figure out what to do or what I was asking them. And sometimes they were just incredibly exhausted because they had a house full of people that never went away.
Good point.
With them 24/7. So, when I felt like our sessions were kind of spiraling and not going anywhere, we just kind of stopped and took a breath together. And, I shared that, this is hard for everybody, that if they wanted to talk just for a second and, what's really going on, is this a really hard day? Why is it a hard day? Sometimes just letting the folks talk about their frustrations and then kind of bringing it back to the child and saying, oh, but look, we talked and now they're calmed down. Like we weren't really paying attention to the little one. They started playing and then we could kind of sneak back in to our therapy. A lot of times that worked and it stayed, where they're like, oh yeah, we tried that, where they were getting so fussy when we were trying to play with them one way. And then we just started saying, okay, well, we'll play with you for a minute. And they played with the toys on their own. And then the kid was like, well, let me see what you're doing. I want to do that too. So, I think that acknowledging was the biggest thing that helped me was, yes, this is hard. This is not easy. It's hard for me too. And letting them know that my house is just as chaotic with kids in the house and 3 dogs and just being scared because this was all unknown territory to us. So I think sometimes stepping away from the therapy for a few minutes and just being a person to share, are you okay? Like, are you doing okay? What's going on? I think sometimes that was the best thing I could have done. And we got back to our therapy. And then we also talked about next time. So if this is not a good session, okay, well, let's just end early for today. But next time, let's have X, Y, and Z ready. And that way we have lots more things to choose from if this one activity isn't working. So that was really helpful too.
So you kind of talked about a lot of things, Missy. I think.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I'm glad you did. Like, I love how you talked about sort of being a person and being open to, like, this is hard for you. Sometimes it's hard for the family. Like, it's okay to acknowledge that like, that's okay. And the technology goes wonky. It's okay. We can come up with a plan B, or we can call back in, or we can figure out something else. So I think everybody was having to figure out how to take care of mental health. And if we weren't, that's when we were really suffering. So I love it that you kind of brought that into your practice, because that's a great way to connect with families rather than just going and focusing on, we got to get him stretched, right? You got to figure out what's going on with that family and that life. So I love that. And Karen's agreeing here. She says, yes, mental supports for parents, especially the newest mamas, had always been a huge undernote part of our job. So being that person is so important. Yeah, I'm just going to scroll through. Good laughs with parents. So Karen's talking about using some humor for sure. And we learned and grew together week by week. Ann says, read about Missy's survivor dogs. Yeah, Missy has some information in this month's update, the ITC update. So check, you get to see a picture of the dogs too. Let's see, we have Michelle, June, and Anne posted the link to the updates. Thank you, Anne. Well, I'm going to toss it to Naomi since we kind of brought up supporting mental health and kind of supporting families that way. I don't know, Naomi, if that ties into a challenges you had to overcome, or if you had a similar experience to Missy at really having to touch base with families on that emotional level. How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, in mental health that we rely a lot on are those nonverbal communications, right? And when you can only see someone from like here to here, it's hard to know what else is happening with their body. It's hard to know, are they feeling tense? Are they maybe crossing their arms? I mean, I could see if they were, rolling their eyes, like, oh, I can't get on board with any of this, right? But all of that other kind of nonverbal communication is really missing, and that's challenging, especially when you're getting to know someone. If you've had that prior relationship and you kind of know, oh, this is, I remember seeing this person before, but when you're meeting someone for the first time on a screen, that can feel really overwhelming. And I think that there's a lot that, I do to kind of help disarm families, right? If I go into the home and I'm a kid person, so I tend to, let's just start playing and let's, start a conversation that way. And sometimes the screen opens and the parents are like, okay, so what are we doing? It's like, ooh, this is a challenging way to start, right? So it took some time really to kind of build that relationship and really focus on, it's okay if we just want to talk about, general things like what your kid did today, right? That is okay to talk about because we're building this relationship. And I know it's going to take some time for you to be willing to tell me, when my child screams, that's really difficult for me, right? I don't expect that on day one. And so I think having that opportunity did feel challenging to kind of build that relationship on screen, and at the same time to kind of communicate to parents, it's okay that this relationship is going to take some time to develop. But I do also think that it provided that opportunity for some parents to feel a little bit safer, right? Because I'm not in the room, so I can't judge them, even though I'm not judgmental, but they sometimes perceive that. People don't sometimes love the term social worker. That brings up some feelings for them. So having the screen also provided that way for parents to feel a little bit more comfortable in kind of sharing because I wasn't in the room with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you brought up about the relationship building. I mean, so important, and it's kind of a little different when you're across the screen, even though, like Missy brings in, some families are on their phones all the time. And so maybe this was a good way to tap into that, right? Then there's a positive there. But at the core, whether you're the service coordinator starting at that initial phone call and initial session, all the way through the providers, the relationship building is all based on that. So I love that you brought that in there. Michelle, you were shaking your head as she was going along. I'm wondering what challenges kind of came up for you as you were trying to work with families.
So I tell families that I work with, I am not a behavior therapist, but I can help you if your toddler is acting like a toddler, especially if they're using whining to communicate and we know they have words. What's been a challenge is in those moments, I'm usually, if I'm face-to-face, I'm right by the parent's side, coaching them through, telling them why we're doing this certain behavior strategy, just for that typical toddler behavior. Sometimes parents will turn the phone away so that I don't see their child acting like a 30-month-old. And one of my slogans is, I'm the one who chose to work with this population. I'm okay. I can handle a tantrum. Another thing that's been, nice or that's been a challenge is that sometimes parents are on the phone too much here. So I have to be really direct and say, can you turn the camera around? Can I see what your little one is up to? Whether they're tantruming or not. Sometimes the parents are like, you're here to talk to me, right? I am, but the child has got to be a part of that session as well.
Yeah, so creative ways to, and you have a way of doing it, I think, with almost a sense of humor, Michelle, that probably doesn't, makes it okay that we're going to shift gears. And Helen puts in here, I think it's helped families to see like us stumble sometimes, that you guys are trying to figure out, everybody was learning it, but maybe that makes some of the hierarchy feeling of like the expert coming into my home, which we don't want in EI, but I can imagine it feeling that way, softens it a bit, that, my internet might go out too, and we're going to work through this. So thanks, Michelle. I'm going to, Dana says when they saw our house pants. Tell us about that, Dana. What's it been? What kind of challenges? And I was thinking about you while Michelle was talking to Dana about kind of overcoming some of those interactions, making families feel comfortable. You already talked about using your tools. So what was that? What were the challenges like for you?
Well, it's funny, being human and, like Missy said, jumping down on the floor and realizing that I had on like tie-dye leggings or something. And I'm like, oh, that's just what it is. Or I'm my business on the top and jammies on the bottom.
Yeah.
And similar, I do have parents that are there in the screen, but I had one, it was my first visit and he was 10 months old and the screen was on him. And I'm like, hi. And he had no language, and Dad was just like, I didn't see him until the second session. And Mom has never spoken. She speaks Japanese. She understands English, but anyway, so that's just funny. Getting around that, like, okay, how do I talk to the 10-month-old who doesn't talk back? I like what Naomi said about that, not being able to read them. Body language was hard, and I had to get really comfortable because I'm not a social worker at saying, how are you feeling about that? I kind of sensing a little something there. So I think that was a challenge that, is kind of jumping through that jumping right into that hoop, just getting in there. I think being super flexible. I feel like I'm a pretty flexible therapist and don't plan ahead of time. We just kind of jump in wherever they are, and kind of like running for my spoon. I ran for snacks a lot because feeding is tricky because often we would model. I think it's incredibly difficult even in the home to do feeding unless you're willing to chew what they're chewing and eat what they're eating. And so I've kind of always done that, but on telehealth, it was different. So I found myself, chewing things. I'd run and they had veggie straws. I'm like, oh no, I don't have any veggie straws, but look, I have this that matches and something similar. And there were lots of times that there were family and service coordinators and other people, and I'm like showing them how to get it out of their mouth and like spitting pieces on my desk and, chewing with my mouth wide open. And so the child could see and imitate, but then also the parent could see and imitate so that they could do it later, because we can say, put it on their back teeth, and chew with your mouth open. But until you see it, and a lot of parents were seeing it kind of wide-eyed, like, wow, that's interesting. But then they would pick it up and do it too. And the child would look at them like, wow, feeding is not stressful. Feeding can be super fun. And, so it was neat though, from a screen the first couple of times. I'm like, luckily my kitchen is close to my office, so I could really kind of run and get snacks. And, I ate oatmeal, whatever we were eating, trying to have something similar. So that was a bit of a challenge, particularly if I hadn't gone to the grocery store, but I kind of stocked up on some of those veggie straws, typical things. But it was nice. I also have a couple of silicone straws. That was my big, huge thing over the, over the pandemic. And I would, we would chew them, and then we'd do the Amazon link, and we'd all chew our big silicone straws. So I think that modeling was fun, and it was different. It felt different on the screen, but I think once we all got used to it and got our feet wet and kind of, got into it, it was neat, but a little challenging at first.
Yeah, like a different way of interacting, but you found your way. Yeah, and it's interesting because in the survey data, we heard a lot of like, without being able to model, this is hard. But you guys have all talked about it's different, but you still modeled. You found other ways to do it because, yeah, adult learners like to watch what to do. And then the great thing about this is then you throw the practice their way. So I think that's an awesome way to do it. We had one practitioner, one of the surveys said, I loved how much the parents and children were interacting when I got out of the way. So on the visit, you might have been munching and stuff there while the mom was just, this wouldn't have been your style, Dana, but while the mom would just be watching, where now it's really directed in a different way. So thank you. I love that. You guys gave some great examples about how to overcome some of those tricky things. Well, I'm looking at our time, and I think I want to kind of combine our last couple of questions into one big takeaway. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things we wanted to have some time to talk about is the transition from doing all your visits virtually to some visits maybe in green spaces, some at some families' homes. A lot of programs are either preparing for or starting to make that transition to seeing some kids face-to-face or in person. I guess you were face-to-face before. So I'm curious about what that's been like for you, and if you guys have advice for people like going forward And you can give advice about just good tele-intervention sessions, but I'd love for you to be thinking about advice for preparing for kind of our next transition as a field back into some face-to-face visits in homes, backyards, parks, wherever. So I guess I might start with you, Brandy, if that's okay. If you have any recommendations when you think about service coordinators helping everybody make that transition, or how you might support families in getting ready for that. What are your thoughts there?
Again, communication. I know that's a big takeaway, but you know, communicating with families that we may be doing like this hybrid thing where we're out one time a month and we're telehealth one time a month. So overly communicating with the families in reference to that, overly communicating with the providers. One thing that I think I've kind of noted just in going back into the homes here recently is extending a little bit of grace to myself, because for over a year now, I haven't thought about travel time. I haven't thought about documentation time. I haven't thought about what papers I need to gather for this or what things I need to save on my computer. So I think just extending a little bit of grace and making sure that I'm scheduling my time appropriately. Again, with tele-interventions, we've eliminated travel time and we're able to see more people more often, but now we're getting back into the swing of it. And I think we sometimes forget about those little nuances, like, oh, for us at our agency, we have to get a car and then we have to go. And then, so it's those little things that we've forgotten about. So I think just extending a little grace to yourself and scheduling accordingly. And also giving yourself a mental break. We've been, like you said, in our pajama pants. What is it, our house pants? We've been in our house pants. We've been in our homes. We're, you know, pretty much, you know, somewhat isolated. Whereas now we're doing lots of peopling. So sometimes just taking a moment once you get back to your office or back to your home and giving yourself that reprieve, I think is also a good bit of advice, because you're kind of getting thrown back into the mix. And us, as well as our families, are probably transitioning. So extending grace to everyone, including ourselves as service coordinators, our providers.
So well said. Thank you, Brandy. I think that's great for all kinds of practitioners, service coordinators, or providers. I know I'm fine. You can see in chat, a lot of folks love that phrase, giving yourself a little grace. And I love what you said. We're doing more peopling now. I was doing some peopling in Walmart over the weekend, and I was noticing I really had to get used to it. Some of us had our masks on, some didn't. And that's okay. It's completely okay now. And I was like, I'm just not used to this. Like, we have to make an adjustment. We all are having a personal transition to make, including professional transitions. Looks like several folks in here are making notes about strategies for the masks when you're going back. So I'm going to throw it to Missy, because Missy, I know, has some interesting kind of good advice for what you're doing as you're making that transition, Missy. So tell us about that for you and any good suggestions you have for others.
Sure. So, and Karen Miller on the chat had suggested it too. On your last visit, before you go into the homes, what I started doing was actually taking a mask out and putting it on so the child could see what I look like, but then also having the parent put their mask on too and saying, you know, mommy's going to have one on too, because when I come to the house, mommy's going to have her face covered as well. And then asking the parent to like kind of put it on sporadically at the house so that it's not so overwhelming, because it's one thing to have a stranger put their mask on, but then kids didn't understand why mommy had their masks on as well. So just kind of giving them that heads up. I also pulled out my thermometer because we're taking temperatures every time we go in. And I wanted the kids to see, oh, look, see, it goes right up to my face. I took my doll's temperature. And then when I would go into the homes, I took their dolls or stuffed animals' temperature, and mommy's first, theirs was last. Sometimes I had mommy do it for me, just because, like I said in the chat, peopling is exhausting. I forgot how much more patience I needed to have to be in the real world. I don't know, like go into a store and people aren't always the nicest. So you forget that because you're in this little bubble for a year. But so it's exhausting always having that smile on and being so nice. But anyway, you know, just having the parent do as much of that ahead of time and letting the child know, remember, Missy's coming with a mask on. And then those first sessions, sitting back and not jumping right in. I've had a lot of kids that are afraid of people in 3D.
They were fine and were so happy on the screen. But when I came to the house, they were so scared. So I would literally sit across the room from them with my doll, and I would still do kind of what we did on the screen. And by the end of the session, if I let them come to me, they were on my lap and everything was great. But, you know, really respecting their body language. I guess that's the best way to say it, because their body language can tell you so much, and not trying to just push through it, letting them know, I know you're scared. I'm a little nervous too. It's okay. And I think the parents appreciated that as well.
Yeah, I think that goes back to Brandy's grace and the patience. I'm not sure which one of you, if it was you, Missy, or somebody else put in the chat, remembering the patience that it takes to you're reestablishing the relationship you had in a different format, but maybe in a different way. So I love that word, the reading their body language and taking your time to get there. Thanks, Missy. The mask is I saw a couple of people talking about that, figuring out how to transition to the mask at home. So some toddlers might be seeing their parents with masks going out to Walmart, but you don't wear them at home. So just figuring out how to fit that in. I like what you said, Michelle, about how many little toddlers mask is going to be one of their first words from the pandemic, right? So how's that been for you, Michelle? Do you have any thoughts about, or I don't know if you've started doing any in-person visits yet, or any advice for folks?
So I think the best advice I would have is to be very upfront with the families that you're seeing. I have children on my caseload who are medically fragile, and I assume the parents are doing everything and are very nervous about things. And I don't want to assume. I just want to say, this is what I'm doing to keep your family safe. This is my job. And whether they feel the same way or they don't, letting them know you might be the first session of my day, you might be the sixth. I might have been in 6 houses, I might have been outside of 6 people's houses. I cannot let you know the nitty-gritty and all the details, but I want parents to feel like they are as informed as possible so that they can make choices on whether they want to stay. I do have a family that said, I want to stay telehealth as long as we can. And I said, of course, I'll respect that. And I've had families in January who said, when are you coming over? So it's, just trying to be very communicative and open as much as you can be with the families. I think that really helps as you navigate starting face-to-face with people that you might have seen behind a screen for over a year now.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point, like Brandy said about the hybrid model. There might be that some families aren't ready to go all face-to-face or all in person, and they want to do it, they ease into it. So whatever flexibility your system offers, I think that's wonderful to meet them kind of where they are and be, like you said, be upfront about how do we want to work this together. So I'm going to ask Dana next, what advice you have, Dana, for that transition to working in person, whether it's outside, inside, wherever that is.
Well, I think that hybrid is a great thing to talk about, because I think once they have us in the home, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. We don't ever want to, some don't ever want to do the other. But what I found, because in one of our localities, we were only allowed to go in once a month for like 2 months. And, a lot were kind of saying, well, we'll just wait then. But it really makes it richer. It makes that telehealth visit richer when you have been there. And so really, I know service coordinators are doing a great job of kind of talking through that as things change and we, we're going back. I think the mask thing, even our general population, you're either scared or I'm never going to wear a mask again. And so, I've had families that say, we're not going to wear a mask, and in one of our localities they have to, and one they don't. And like you said, Michelle, this is what I'm going to do to keep your family safe. You make your choices. So I think that just being really being open about that. My only other advice for going back is, my goodness, watch your time, because I cannot get out of the house in an hour. I just can't do it. Because, just being in there and just, meeting the family, particularly those that I'm seeing again, or those that I'm just meeting, it's been just so great. And it is almost like a little bit of we have to meet, even if we've known each other for a year on the, on the computer, just kind of going through that. So yes, watch your time, because that is tricky. And also, like, I find myself like kind of wanting to dive in sometimes. Okay, hold on, don't rob them of this thing that they are really good at, just because I just want to get in there and touch and do all the things. So
That's
yeah,
a great point. That's a great point, Dana, that you might be so happy to see the kids. You have to kind of watch yourself and see where you go back to some of those programs. Yeah, rein yourself in. There you go. Thanks, Dana. And I am looking at our time. We have about a minute or two left, but I wanted to ask Naomi to give us any advice, thinking kind of from that, even that self-care perspective, what advice you'd have for folks starting to make that transition.
Yeah, I mean, I think self-care is such an important, we talk about it all the time. And one of the things that we are amazing at as early interventionists is being flexible and supporting families and doing everything we can to kind of meet the needs of other people, which is wonderful. And it's so, what draws many of us into this field. And thinking about that balance though, right? If I'm going into a session and I'm real irritated, and even if I put on a happy face and on the inside, I'm like, this is the worst, right? I'm not going to be as effective at my job, and that session is probably not going to go as well. And so that piece of, I need to eat lunch. I probably need to use the bathroom. I might just need a minute. Like, that was really challenging, and I just need to take 5 minutes to scream in my car, or I got to drive around the block for a minute because I am definitely not ready. So thinking about those things, because, as much as it's important to think about what are you walking into in a family's home, it's also really important to think about what are you bringing into a family's home. What kind of presence are you bringing in? What kind of emotional state are you bringing in? And so really taking that time, even if it's small pieces throughout your day that you can build in so that you can have the energy to do this again tomorrow and the day after that and a year from now. And especially in a time where it's kind of required a lot of flexibility on our part and on the parts of the family, everybody having that opportunity for self-care is really key.
Yeah, so important. There's one of my favorite quotes, Naomi, is something like, I say favorite quotes and I can't remember it, but it's something like, take responsibility for the energy you bring into the room. Mm-hmm. And I love the way you described that. So take care of yourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at our time. Thank you so much, Naomi, for wrapping us up with that important message about taking care of yourselves. We talk so much about helping the family transition and making sure the child is okay and familiar with the masks, but don't forget yourselves as well. Brandy says, can we get weekly self-care emails reminders from Naomi? Naomi, I think you're pretty popular. I saw you in the chat. People were like, I wish I had Naomi here. And I think Terry said, tele-intervention. Now we can. So when people might be wanting to snatch all of you guys up after this. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you guys giving your time to do this chat today. I wanted to let our participants know that you guys are going to receive an email, maybe it already be in your inbox or it might be there soon, with a feedback survey. And Lisa's typed the link into chat. If our participants could give us feedback, once you complete the feedback survey, you'll have access to your certificate of completion. One important note with the certificate, when you look at it at first, the date might look wrong. Once you print it or download it to your computer, the date stamp will update. So you will have the correct date. If you have any questions about that, you can always send me a quick email and let me know. But that should be no problem once you either download or print your certificate. So that is it for us, guys. I want to thank our participants so much for giving your time for multiple meetings and all to get prepared for this. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise, and I think the families you're supporting are really fortunate to have you. So you guys take care of yourselves too. And thanks everybody on the participant list here for joining us as well today. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. One quick thing I'll say, Talks on Tuesdays will be on a break. We take a summer break for June and July. So just pay attention to your email. You'll get information about our September and October Talks on Tuesday series over the summer. So that will be coming. You guys have a wonderful rest of your summer. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.